Welcome back, guys. Today's episode, I am sharing 8 terrifying true Alaskan bush roads horror stories. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now let's begin. I'm not superstitious. 15 winters plowing Alaskan Pass on the Dalton Highway will burn that out of you. You stop believing in ghosts when the wind tries to roll a 10-ton grader and the cold turns spit into shrapnel. But I learned something in January of 2019 when the pass decided to give a man back to the road. My name's not the point. Up here we go by call signs. On the radio I'm North 6. I run tandem with Jolene, South 4, on graveyard shifts, keeping the pass open for the oil field guys. If you've never been out there, Alaskan's a wall of wind ripping off the Brooks Range. The mile marker that matters is 244. Chain-up area lies just shy of that. The pipeline hums a low note that eats into your bones, and the sky, if it isn't black, smears green with the aurora like someone rubbed their knuckles across a painting. It was 50 below without counting wind chill, ice fog hugging the pavement, and that endless twinkling in the beams like you're driving through ground glass. I saw him first on the third pass, a figure in my right-hand mirror, dead center of the road. At 50, no one is just out for a stroll. Even the truckers don't step out unless something's on fire. He wasn't dressed right. No parka flare, no reflective tape, just a dark bundle that resolved into a man waving his arms slow like he was underwater. I keyed the radio. South 4, you copy? Got a walker at 244. Negative North, Jolene came back. I'm 30 seconds behind you, I'll verify. I eased off the throttle. You don't stop on the crest unless you want to be a hood ornament, but you don't ignore a person on the pass either. My plow cast its own blizzard. Snow wing through a white sheet that swallowed and spit the beams. I made the pull through and turned for my downbound sweep. Maybe it was just a trick of the lights. Only the man was gone. Jolene's voice crackled. No one at the crest. At North, might be your lenses frosting up. My lenses were fine, my gut wasn't. Fog was thicker on the next descent. I heard the pipeline before I saw it, a subsonic thrumming that makes your fillings sing. The plow's cab heater worked overtime, breathing diesel breath into air that never got truly warm. I hit the chain up, flashed my beacons, and stepped out to knock packed snow off the wing. Your nostrils stick together at that temperature, your breath falls around you in glitter. That's when I saw the tracks. They came from the ditch, straight across the road to the crown. Bare rubber prints, the kind you get off those cheap felt-soled boots with no lugs, and then nothing. No outbound trail, no return, just the neat dark ovals ending at the yellow line. South, you seeing this? I clicked my mic. Static scratched back at me. A second later, Jolene's voice, but thin, like it was coming from the edge of the atmosphere. I read you, North. Storm's eating the repeater. What's the problem? Tracks, middle of the road, end at the crown. Say again? I hopped back into the cab, took a sip off my thermos, and pulled forward. The light hit the crest and he was there again, only now he was closer, not running. Standing sideways to me, shoulders slumped, face a smear under the hood, one hand up like a child in a classroom. He read as wrong, like a photo that's been overexposed. The proportions were a little off, arms too long, torso too short, spine curved in a question mark. The left sleeve hung empty. South, I said, visual again. He's at the crest. I'm not picking that up on mine. Jolene's tone flattened. Do not stop on the crest, North. Copy? You want to get both of us killed? I didn't stop, but I slowed enough to see his face in the wash of the floodlights. It wasn't a face so much as the memory of one. Frost-burned, waxy, eyes reflecting like road sign sheeting. H. His mouth worked, forming shapes without sound. Then the radio spoke in a voice that wasn't Jolene's. Orth, it rasped. Open. I mashed the air horn and the thing flinched. The wing caught the spindrift and threw it across him. When the snow thinned, he wasn't there anymore. The chain-up area felt like a spotlighted stage. Dark walls of rock and snow, a river of blacktop, wind as an audience. I made the turnaround and the VHF went dead. No carrier, no static, just a blank, like someone had unplugged the world. At the bottom of the grade, there's a pullout used by truckers to chain and unchain. A Peterbilt sat there like a stranded cow, hazards pulsing. I pulled alongside. The driver's door was open, and there were footprints in the snow from cab to road and, again, ending at the crown. The cab light burned a cone of nicotine yellow. The sleeper curtain stirred like something had breathed on it. Hello? I called, because of course I did. I've hauled enough men out of undercarriages and snowbanks to know the sound of trouble. Something moved in the sleeper. Something that sighed like air leaving a bellows. Dispatch, this is North 6 at mile 243. Disabled truck, possible. I stopped. It was my voice talking back at me. Not exactly, but close enough that my skin went wrong. Disabled truck, possible. I took 2 steps toward the open door. The smell hit me, metal and old pennies and the sharp animal stink of wet fur, impossible at 50 below. The sleeper curtain snapped again and a hand, gloveless, gray, long as if the fingers had an extra joint, curled around the edge. The nails were too thick, too dark. It was the hand of a man who'd been soaked and frozen and thawed and soaked again. "North," the radio whispered in my own voice. "Open." The Peterbilt's hazard clicked. The sound bored into me. The red blink, the click, the breath, the smell. I took a step back and the hand moved faster than anything should in that cold, appearing on the doorframe, then the door, hauling something forward that hunched and unfolded at the same time. It wore a coat that might have been Carhartt in another life, sleeves shredded. Its head hit the cab light and the light dimmed, as if it drew from it. Its mouth moved against teeth I couldn't see, gums black, lips split. "Open," it said again, and this time the sound didn't come from the radio. It came from the pipeline behind us, the low hum refitted into that single word. Not a plea, a command. I threw the transmission into gear so hard I felt it in my elbows and popped the clutch. The plow lurched. The thing on the door pivoted with it, hands sliding, nails screeching against metal. I hit the beacons, the strobes, the horn. The sound filled the world. The light sliced it apart. The shape turned its face toward me like it didn't know which part of me held my eyes. "North!" Jolene shouted, clear and close. "You're off channel. You're—" Her voice broke in a fizz of static and weather. "Get out of there!" I hit the wing extension. The blade bit the berm and the throw of snow caught the open door, slamming it. The hand vanished. I didn't look to see where it went. I made the run like I was fleeing a fire. The road was a tape spilling under me, white and black. In the mirror, the Peterbilt's hazards winked like the last 2 heartbeats of a dying thing and then went out. By the time I hit the pump station turnout, my hands shook so hard I had to hold them under my thighs and breathe, eyes on the green smear of the sky where the stars should be. Jolene pulled in 10 minutes later, her plow white with frost, her face whittled by cold and worry. "You don't stop on the crest," she said, and then, seeing my face, "What did you see?" I told her. Not everything, the hand, the smell, but enough, and the tracks that ended at the middle of the road like the missing had learned to walk into the crown of it and become hum. People from the lower 48 hear state trooper and picture a cruiser 2 minutes away. Up here, we're a rumor that arrives 3 hours after you need it. My patch is the Taylor Highway, and the thin skiff of towns and historical ghosts along it. Jackwade Junction, Chicken Eagle if the river's friendly. My name's Phil. 12 years in, I stopped keeping count of moose strikes and domestic calls that turn into hunting trips for missing men. But there are a few nights I keep in a separate drawer in my head. Nights when the line between story and report blurs. This was mid-September, the hills shot with yellow, and the first dusting of snow on the high ground. What we call termination dust, like summer getting its pink slip. The road was mostly gravel, mostly empty. At dusk I got a call, welfare check on a prospector who hadn't returned to Chicken after heading toward the Jackwade historical site. Retired Army, responsible, known at the saloon as the guy who paid cash and kept his head down. Dispatch pinged his sat messenger near milepost 25, just off a pullout most folks use to pee with a view of nothing. I rolled out with a Winchester in the rack and a rattle in my dash I've been meaning to chase for 2 winters. The pullout held his rig, an older Subaru that had no business past pavement. Driver's door closed, keys gone. What it did have was a tidy pyramid of rocks in front of the bumper, 5 stones stacked neat, like something left on a grave. A second cairn mirrored it 10 feet away. A third cairn marked the trail down into the brush, and then every 20 yards, another. None of the stones were frosted, they were fresh built. "Prospector," I said to nobody, "do you think you are Hansel?" The air had that clean burn like a scraped pan, no bugs, no birds, too quiet. I pinged dispatch on the sat phone with my coordinates. The signal went echoey for a second and then classy. "Red, copy 2-1, dispatch said. "Lights going, you want backup from TOC?" "Wouldn't say no," I said, knowing I wouldn't see help till morning. "I'm walking in 100 yards. I'll leave markers." I left my own cairns next to his, out of habit more than anything, then switched to my handheld VHF. Rocks clicked under my boots. In the alders, the world narrowed to a tunnel of cold green. The ground had that soaked sponge feel that makes your ankle do dumb things. I smelled river somebody had hidden. I smelled iron. I smelled the sweetness you get right before snow. The cairns led me straight, which is not usual out here. Easiest way to get lost is to follow a straight line that you imagined. But these were real, weighable, deliberate. At 50 yards, I found the first boot print with good edge, facing down trail, size 10, lug sole. At 70 yards, another cairn, this one with a dead raven feather tucked under the top stone. At 95, something moved to my right, a whisper like a sleeve on bark. "Sir," I called. "Alaska State Troopers, in case you're hiding from a bear or a ticket." Nothing. "Sir, are you injured?" That's when I heard my daughter. "Daddy?" I stopped so hard my knees squealed. "Who's there?" I said, and then, stupid. "Emma?" Emma was 12 and 300 miles away in Fairbanks with her mom, asleep under Taylor Swift posters. The voice had her lilt, her careful softening of the D in daddy to keep me sweet. "Emma," I said again, throat closing. The voice came from the left this time, behind me last time. The reverb on it wasn't human. It sounded like a word played through a jar. "Daddy," it said, each syllable pulled on a string. I felt my skin go to glass. I set my hand on the Winchester. "All right," I called, "because you talk to fear out loud up here or it moves in. If you can ask for me, you can tell me your name." Nothing except what I thought was wind, and then realized was breathing. Real close, dragging through something wet. I flipped up the shotgun's bead and pivoted. The cairn ahead was taller. The stones on it were arranged like fingers. I took a knee, pretending to tie my boot, and looked hard at the ground around it. Lots of scuffing, like someone had tripped and gotten up fast, and the print I found wasn't a boot. It was a bare human foot, heel deep, toes spread, no frostbite. Too fresh, too dumb for someone this careful. I backed toward the last cairn. Something snapped in the brush to my right, deliberately. That's a thing you learn out here. Animals don't break twigs on purpose. People do, or things that want to be people. 2-1 status? Dispatch asked in my ear, their voice gone thin again, as if the sky itself was trying to share our channel. "Working it," I said, keeping my voice bored because fear feeds off keying high. "Possible injured hiker," I'm hearing. A tap on my cruiser's glass. Except my cruiser was 100 yards back on the road. I heard it again, close to my left ear, like someone's finger on glass. Tap, tap, tap. The hair on my neck tried to crawl off my head. "Sir," I said broadly, pointing the shotgun at the sound. "I'm going to deploy a flare. Do not approach." I cracked one, and the blaze turned the green tunnel hell orange. For an instant, the alders threw long, skinny shadows that moved when nothing visible moved. Under the flare's rip, I saw a shape duck back, taller than me, too narrow, head cocked in a way that made my spine bend. The smell came then, just like on that Dalton story I heard later, wet. Fur and pennies, unfitting for the dry brush and the cold. "Daddy," the voice said again from behind my right shoulder and to the left at the same time. It came from above me, too, like someone talking from a tree. I aimed high, and the flare hissed brighter, and whatever was there hissed back. The mimicking isn't uncommon. If you ask certain folks east of the park's highway, they'll tell you something old learned our names when we started saying them into the trees. They'll tell you cairns are not for wayfinding, but for boundaries, and it's impolite to move through a boundary you didn't make. They'll tell you not to whistle at the lights, and not to answer the forest if it speaks in a loved one's voice. I had already answered. "Come on," I said to the brush. "You called me. Here I am." What stepped out might pass for a man if you'd never met one. It wore clothes. It had limbs arranged like ours. It had a face assembled from the idea of a face. Eyes very round and very dark, mouth much too wide, chin too soft like unbaked bread. It wasn't a ghoul or a ghost, it was a wrong copy. The flare's light skinned over it, and its shadow ran the wrong way. "Sir," I said, shaking, "where's the prospector?" It moved its mouth and spoke in the voice it stole. "Prospector," it said in dispatch's cadence. "Welfare." "Where is he?" I snapped, no longer liking my own voice. It lifted a hand and pointed, not with a finger, but with the whole arm, from shoulder to wrist like a branch bending. The direction was toward a break in the alders and a little trickle of water riffling over stones. I wasn't going to go there, but then I saw the hat. Army surplus boonie, OD green with a set of pins on the band. The crown was crushed. It was at the base of a bigger cairn in that open space, and that cairn wasn't neat. It was a mess pile. Something had kicked it apart. There was a lot of scuffling around. There was a smear that didn't look like dirt. "Back," I told the copy, and it did, which was somehow the worst part of all. I got him. He was 4 yards beyond the hat, slumped on his side with his arm under him. Pulse faint, breath worse. The cheap boots had blown out. His socks were little boats. His face wasn't marked. His hands were torn up like he'd been building a lot of little altars in a hurry. When he came to, he didn't look at me. He looked past me at the copy crouched in the alders and closed his eyes like a man seeing a hole he'd dug too deep. "We had a deal," he whispered later into the blanket in my cruiser as I blasted the heater and the wipers squeaked at nothing. We had a deal, but I got greedy. I moved the wrong stones. It doesn't like that. It wanted names. I gave it mine, and mine wasn't long enough. What did you give it? I asked. I had him on oxygen and heat packs. His sat messenger sat like a dead frog on the dash. Voices, he said, and the words sounded like confession. He stabilized. We made it to the highway. Talk sent backup. I logged everything. I logged nothing about my daughter's voice. I tried to play my body cam for the brass. The video was perfect. The audio was a hash of wind and little popping sounds like knuckles cracking. But if you boost the gain and you know what you're listening for, you can catch a scrap of my own voice from a half hour before saying, "I'm walking in 100 yards. It bleeds into a whisper that isn't mine, delaying me in time, asking me to go deeper. A week later, the prospector left me a brown envelope at the post. No return address. Inside, a memory card from a cheap trail camera. 33 shots of rocks. Little stacks and big stacks. Fresh hands in every frame. His own, mostly. The last shot is him. Selfie accidental. Face blown white by the flash. And behind him, something is in the brush, folding itself into the shape of his missing sleeve. I used to tell rookies the tailor was lonely but honest. Now I tell them the truth. H. When you see stacked stones, mind your feet. Don't whistle at the lights. Don't answer when the timber speaks in love. If a cairn asks to be moved, ask it whose boundary it is. And if you hear tapping on your windshield when you're still 100 yards from your rig, you didn't hear it. Keep walking, keep your eyes on the road. The forest knows your name. Don't teach it your voice. I'm the kind of Alaskan who keeps a toe strap in the crib beside the baby monitor. Day job is wrenching at a little shop in Cantwell. Nights I'm Tri-Valley Fire and EMS, which means if your spot or inReach chirps SOS anywhere between the parks and the land of nobody, my phone does a terrible rooster impression and I go. The Denali Highway is my patch of church, 135 miles of gravel that looks empty until it decides not to be. The state closes it in winter, which just means the signs come out and DOT stops holding your hand. Late October, freeze up. Fireweed already black and the puddles armored with that first brittle skin of ice. Sky bruise purple by 4 p.m. Dispatch pinged my phone around dusk. SOS west of McLaren Country between the Susitna Crossing and the high ground, probably a photographer chasing Aurora who misjudged how fast 30 degrees can become 10 below. I grabbed the F-350 with studs and the winch, loaded a sled and a med bag and told my wife I'd be dumb and careful in equal parts. The gate on the Cantwell side was open 1.5 feet like always, just enough for a truck if you commit and don't mind a new pinstripe. The sign, no maintenance beyond this point, flapped on a chain like a bad joke. I radioed the shop's base unit and the one old DOT repeater that still pays attention when the weather is wrong. Unit 7 rolling the Denali westbound, single vehicle welfare. I'll mark with flares at turns. It was the kind of night that makes the road feel like it's riding you. Road frost had already grown its white whiskers. The Susitna ahead was a slow, black snake under skim ice, the kind that pretends to be safe and then swallows your rig because it's hungry. The Aurora was a curtain, pale green with a stitched hem of red, hanging in swags above the road. Dead calm, so quiet the studs ticking dry patches sounded like a clock at mile. Call it 66 from the Cantwell side. I know the posts out here wander and the math changes with who you ask, but we locals carry our own map in bone. I saw the first mile marker. Just a square of green on a 2x4 with white numbers, 66. I glanced at the trip odometer because I'm that guy. It read 41.2 since the gate. The inReach I carry squawked. New message, the block letters of panic you get when fingers are numb. Fell off road near a turn, I think near a hill where views of big drainage. Can't get back to car, phone dead. He'd included a location, but shoulder season satellites are drunk and the little chevron that should have been 40 miles away jumped and settled right, the way I was going. I dropped a flare at a blind rise and kept crawling. Every culvert makes its own music at night. You learn them like songs. By the fourth, the hum of the studs changed to that nervous violin string squeak that means black ice. The Aurora paused, brightened, then ran like someone pulled it faster. Then I passed 66 again. I noticed because I have a dumb brain that hooks on the shiny bits. The board wasn't the same. The white paint had run on the last 6. Someone had tried to carve an arrow into the post and failed. I tapped the brakes, thought about turning around, told myself I'd just misseen the first one. The trip odometer blinked 46.9. I keyed the radio. Base Unit 7. Static that wasn't static answered back, almost like breathing. Then clear. 7. Go. Possible signage confusion around 6th. I stopped because the word 6 came back in my own voice. A half beat later, tie 6, like someone scrubbed tape. I lifted my thumb off the mic and checked the handheld just to be sure I hadn't butt-keyed it. The handheld was stone quiet. Mile marker again. 66. New post. New screw heads catching the light. A third time around a curve that I swear I'd already seen. Twin alders making a gate over the road, the left one with a fresh scrape. The Aurora did something I've never seen. It jumped a gap, from here to there with nothing in between, like frames missing in a film. I stopped at the next pullout, set 2 flares in the snow so I could triangulate against my own future stupidity. Walked the ditch with a headlamp, found fox prints and boot lugs, 1 set of each, the boots fresher and straight as a string. He was walking good then. I swung the beam across the road and froze. The snow crystals lifted a little in the light and, how do I say this without you deciding I'm a liar? They hung there a second, as if scared to settle. I found the Subaru a mile later, or 5 minutes, or an hour. Parked dead center of the eastbound lane at a lazy angle, like it had drifted and then stopped because even the road didn't want to deal with it anymore. Driver's door open, no footprints out, 1 triangular emergency reflector on the ground behind the bumper, its face frost-flowered, its shadow pointing the wrong way under my headlight. I did the thing you do, kill the engine so you can hear the world. The Denali answered with silence for long enough that my heartbeat felt rude. Then, close and far at once, a human voice called, "Hey!" like a question. "EMS," I yelled. "Call back." 2 syllables come out of you when you're not sure if you're calling a person or a bear. "Hey," the voice said, but from my left and my right at the same time. It was a man's voice, younger than me, dry-throated, friendly on purpose. I got my head on a swivel, spotlit behind the Subaru, writing in the frost on the rear window, scrubbed by a glove. "Don't stop." Everything in me went to glass because there wasn't any frost left to write on. The heater had been on recently enough to clear the rear. The writing showed through, like it had been there first, and then the frost grew over it. "Sir?" I called without moving my eyes from the glass. "Where are you?" "Here," he said, with that same practiced ease someone uses on a dog they've met once. "Just past 66. Can you come this way?" I put my hand on the Subaru's hood. Warm. Too warm. The engine ticked like a cooling pie. The passenger seat held a camera backpack, a thermos, an in-reach blinking a faint green heartbeat. The driver's floor had a mess of hand warmer wrappers and a scattering of metal washers that didn't belong anywhere. On the dash, in the faint condensation, someone had written 66 3 times and then scratched through the last 2 with a key. The road behind me glowed red. I turned. My 2 flares were there, 100 yards back, exactly how I'd left them. One had burned down to a stub that shouldn't have lasted more than 15 minutes. I'd laid them a mile ago. "Here," the voice said again, this time somewhere up ahead, where the Aurora dropped its hem. I pointed my headlamp beam and caught a man crouched at the edge of the road beyond the next rise. He folded his arm up to block the light the way people do when their eyes are snow-blind. Good down jacket, hat with a fur ruff. He didn't move his feet. "Don't stop," he said, but the words came with the wrong mouth shape. He said it like someone who hadn't used English first. He gestured small with his hand, a draw-me-on flick like you'd use on a skittish cat. My radio clicked in my pocket. A voice that was mine said Unit 766. I hadn't keyed it. I got in the truck. I got in because my body wanted steel around it and the shotgun in the rack and the familiar stink of brake dust and coffee. I put it in gear and tapped the gas and the tires scrabbled once and bit. The crouched figure didn't change his posture as I rolled slow. He didn't blink. He didn't fog the air. I passed him with the window cracked. He smelled like hot pennies and willow. The light caught his face and there wasn't one. There was a suggestion, a child's drawing of a man, no detail except a place where the mouth should go. I didn't stop. I drove until my odometer clicked 50 miles from the gate because I needed a measure that wasn't the road's idea. When it rolled over, the Aurora snapped back to curtains, and the mile marker standing at the next turnout read 67. That simple. The air warmed like someone had shut a freezer door. Then from the ditch on my right, weak and human and scared the right way. "Here." He was wedged under a tangle of alders 10 feet down, leg at a wrong angle, single glove, face the gray color that means hypothermia is already writing its name. He'd kicked himself into a well and trapped his boot heel in the roots. Close enough to the road he could hear cars if there had been any, but far enough that the dark made him invisible. His camera sat on his belly like a stupid baby. There were little stones lined up on the dirt next to him, 5 of them. His hands were raw. "I wrote 'Don't stop' on the glass," he said later, voice shaking as I wrapped his leg and lit every flare I had for warmth and courage both. "Not for you, for me. I kept stopping. Every time I stopped, it felt like the road got longer. The 66 was everywhere. How long, I asked, while my fingers worked and my brain whispered Sunday school prayers. I hopped. Hadn't used since the 80s. 2 hours maybe, he said. Or a day, I don't know. We made it back to the gate by moonlight. The odometer said 79 miles. The clock said 1:30. The flares in the road where I'd set them were gone. In the morning, I went to McLaren to borrow a coffee I didn't need and asked the owner if he'd seen weird signage. He laughed with no teeth. Son, the posts up there get moved every year by people and floods and time, but you don't follow posts after October. You follow distance and your own head. That stretch eats seconds. That's what my dad used to say. Don't stop. Don't listen. If you smell the river when the air is still, you're not hearing water. You're smelling time. I pulled the dash cam footage that night because I needed to know if my brain had fallen out. It showed my hood, the road, the aurora. At 66, the video gapped for exactly 3 frames and resumed with the angle shifted a degree lower like something had sat on the truck. The audio was worse. There's a point where my own voice checks in, Unit 7 rolling 6th, and then the same words layer a half-second later, ghost of ghost, echoed and thin. If you boost it and let the room get quiet, you can hear me say, don't stop, and under that, a voice that isn't mine, trying hard to shape the same sound. I still go out there. You can't do what I do and be scared of the road, but I don't trust the numbers anymore. I turn the dash lights down so I can see my own breath. I follow the odometer because distance is a promise you make to yourself. And if I see 66 more than once, I don't say it out loud. I don't want the road learning the word from my mouth. Ask around Chaitina about the McCarthy Road, and you'll get the same sermon. 2 spare tires, a real jack, and respect for old iron. It's 60 miles of ex-rail bed pretending to be a road. 40 of those miles are washboard, the rest are railroad ghosts. Spikes working their way up through the gravel, trestles moldering in the trees, and one bridge that will teach you humility if nothing else will. I run a seasonal shuttle out to Kennecott. Stock van, high clearance, a cargo rack for backpacks and regrets. I know every pothole with a name. I've changed flats at the Gillahina trestle ruins with the head net over my face while the mosquitoes filed a tax return on my blood. But the Cuscalana is the landmark, mile 17-ish out of Chitina, a single-lane steel truss tucked into a canyon that swallows sound and gives it back colder. 200 feet above the river, or 238 if you believe the plaque. The deck hums under your tires. You look down if you're stupid or new. You look straight ahead if you want to live forever. That was July, deep green, everything wet with a recent squall. I had 3 in the back, a couple from Ohio and a guy with a camera who wanted his lens to find God. The rule on that bridge is courtesy. You stop before the curve, roll your window down, listen for the growl of something coming. Most of us hit the hazards creep. There's no radio clear call-out that anyone agrees on, but the culture is old railroad. Don't be dumb and let the other guy go if you're arguing with gravity. I stopped. Window down. The air smelled like wet rock and willow. I heard the river, thin for summer, and a sound like someone tapping a coin on steel far below. The rain had just quit, and the valley curated a little fog for itself, laid in layers like fleece blankets. The camera guy stood to get a shot through the open slider. I told him to sit unless he wanted to meet the Ravens again later. That's when she knocked on my window. Not my door, my window. 3 little taps. I looked left, and there she was in the ditch at my hip. 8 years old maybe, hair dark as the canyon, red raincoat glossy with wet like a Christmas ornament. She had a stick in one hand and a breath that fogged the glass in a perfect circle that didn't fade fast enough. She had no mud on her shoes. I rolled it down the rest of the way because I am a spectacular idiot. "Hey kiddo," I said, scanning the brush behind her for the inevitable adult. "You okay?" She looked past me at the bridge with a face too blank for rain or a child. "My mom's waiting," she said in the small voice kids use to get you to lean closer. "She went first. I need a ride." "Where's home?" I asked. Ohio asked, "Do you know her?" Like anyone could know anyone out here without the whole town knowing it too. "Across," she said, and lifted the stick. The end of it had a little metal hoop wired to it like a fishing net without the net. She drew 2 circles in the air. Slow. There was a hum in the bridge that matched her wrist. I don't pick up hitchers unless I can see the end of their story from the driver's seat. It's not the city. A person becomes your problem for 40 miles, and you don't get to change your mind once the trees close the door. A child is an exception carved into all our bones, but my gut clenched the way it does when a moose decides to step off the bank. I looked down at the console, at the little pile of junk that lives in the van. 2 spare tie-down hooks, a railroad spike I'd found near the Gillahina because old stuff calls to my back pocket, a roll of quarters for the post office I never get to while it's open. The spike shone wet, although I hadn't touched it that day. "Sweetie," I said, stalling for the parent who should be walking up with apologies, "what's your name?" She tilted her head like she was reading the bridge. "I forgot," she said, cheerful. "Do you have gum?" The camera guy leaned forward between the seats. "This some local ghost story?" he said, half excited and half irritated he hadn't been told ahead of time. "Stay in your seat," I snapped because something in me refused to be the punchline to our own campfire tale. I looked at the girl. "We'll cross," I told her. "Your mom can meet us on the other side." Her smile was so wide it wanted to tear at the corners. I put it in drive. The van nose-dipped off the crown and onto the bridge's deck. The hum under my tires climbed my spine. I keep it at a crawl there. We were 3 car lengths on when the hazard lights started flashing without me touching the switch. Click, click. The van did its own heartbeat. The camera guy said, "Dude?" The Ohio wife put her hand over her chest like people do when the air gets thin. Halfway, the engine hiccuped. Not a stall, a cough, like a small polite child clearing their throat to be heard. I fed it gas. It coughed again and the lights dimmed a little as if someone had spooled the voltage through a wet rag. My hands went cold and slick. I do not stall vehicles on that bridge. I do not stop. Then, soft, from the passenger side, "We can walk," the girl said, like she was reminding me of the obvious. "We can look." The word look came out with too many O's. I know that bridge well enough to know where the boards squeak if your tire is an inch too far to the right, where the mesh guard catches a wet boot, where the drop becomes a story your body can't tell itself without wanting to see the end. The gorge throws your voice back changed. It will make a coward of your brakes. You don't walk. The engine died. Silence came down so hard it had. Wait. The river sound cut away like a switch. The aurora. No aurora. That's the Denali. Here it was clouds running low, a gull peeling back its cry into the cove, the water far below making a swallowed sound. My 3 hearts in the back went still. My own came up into my throat. "Don't stop," Ohio's husband said. I could tell he didn't know why he said it. He whispered it like a prayer he'd learned as a kid and forgotten he'd kept. I cranked. Nothing. The kind of nothing that says your battery's fine and your spark is fine, but your decision-making got in a fight with something older and lost. The check light popped on, then blinked out. The girl had turned sideways in her seat and was looking down through the slats like you can see the bottom of a river that far. She smiled again, the not smile. I picked up the railroad spike from the console and set it on the dash without deciding to do that. The metal was warm. The bridge hummed deeper, the sound of it moved in my teeth. It wasn't trucks or wind, it felt organized. The girl's face tightened just a millimeter. She lifted the stick and tapped the metal hoop 3 times against the doorframe. Tap, tap, tap. From far below, the same tapping came back, wrong speed, wrong time, as if the echo had forgotten its job and made up a new one. I cranked again. The engine turned once, twice. The gauge lights died like breath held. I might have said something dumb to the van then, promised it oil changes and a new air filter, promised it I'd never again make fun of the squeak in second gear, begged if you need the truth. "Don't stop," I said out loud to the machine, and then I said it to the girl without looking at her because the shape of the words felt like a rope. "We don't stop on the Tuscalana." The spike slid an inch on the dash like something under the paint had exhaled. The engine caught, not strong, not happy, but turning. The van crawled like it had a hand on its back. I kept it straight. Didn't touch the brake. Didn't look down. The girl's hand left a wet arc on the glass where she traced her stick hoop. She laughed once, high and delighted, and the sound didn't come out of her mouth. It came from the lattice, from under, from the old bones of the bridge where the railroad kept its stories. We came off the far side like a cork popping. The hum dropped to a human sound. The engine remembered what gasoline is for. I didn't stop until the pull-out past the curve where the road shoulders widen enough to breathe. The girl was gone. Not a door opening. Not a little red coat going out into the brush. The seat held a patch of wet that steamed even though the air had cooled. The Ohio wife was crying in the way people do when their body knows the shape of disaster and then doesn't get to wear it. The camera guy had both hands on his key. Amra, like the thing would confess, he said, "I got her. I had to have gotten her." He didn't. He had 30 seconds of fog on the glass and then a blank where the sensor did a weird rolling banding effect that looks like a bad TV. He had my hands, he had the spike on the dash, he had my face doing math I had never wanted to use. I drove back through 2 days later on a supply run, alone. There was a bouquet of grocery store flowers, rubber banded to the guardrail at the midpoint, already gray. The little placard beneath it said only A, no date. I know better than to start asking the old-timers for names. They give you enough to keep you safe. They don't give you the kind that keeps you curious. I told this to a man at the bar in McCarthy that night, because stories multiply or die, and I would rather know which side they choose. He said his uncle used to run ore back when ore was a thing. You didn't stop on the Kuskalana, he said. Not even when the rails sang, especially not then. They said the river wanted its count. If you stopped, it counted you. If you looked down, you taught it your face. Was there a girl? I asked, because I am not a fast learner. Sometimes it was a boy, he said. Sometimes a dog. Always something that makes you open the door. I keep the spike on the dash now, and I keep my eyes straight and my tires steady, and I don't say the names of the bridge or the river when I'm on it. The McCarthy Road is honest about what it owes you. It owes you miles if you earn them, and good views if you remember to bring patience. It owes you nothing else. If you hear a small hand knock on your glass at the curve, do what the old men taught me to do. Put your hand on the dash and remember how warming metal feels when the world is cold. Say it out loud if you have to. Even if the canyon sends your voice back wrong, we don't stop on the Kuskalana. We don't lie. Oak down. We go forward. We leave the counting to the river. If you work out of the Slana Ranger Station long enough, the Nebezna Road teaches you 3 names the way a teacher does vocabulary. Rock, Jack, Lost. 3 Fords, 3 moods. Rock is stubborn. Jack is quick. Lost is exactly what it says on the tin. I'm Morgan, seasonal for Wrangell St. Elias, and I spend half my summer teaching folks how to evaluate a water crossing and the other half dragging the ones who didn't listen back to high ground. The rule we give every driver at the station is simple enough to fit on a free map. If you can't walk it, you can't drive it. The sub-rule is the one you only hear when we hand you a throw bag and look you in the eye. If the creek starts talking plain English, you don't talk back. Early June of 2021, warm week after a cold spring. The melt flipped from steady to greedy. Every creek woke up loud and fast. Around 9 p.m., still bright enough to pretend it wasn't night, dispatch chirped the inReach on my belt. SOS ping near mile 34, Lost Creek. Message came through in that blocky panic font you get when fingers are trembling. Truck stuck. Water rising. Need help. Wife walked back towards Slana. I grabbed my partner for the swing shift, Nina, former guide, muscles like braided rope, and we loaded the Ranger Tacoma with throw ropes, waders, come along, and too many blunt warnings. We could already hear water before we left pavement. Slana fell away behind us. The spruce and birch closed ranks. The road turned to washboard and pale dust. Rock Creek was already wearing its bad mood. The water went from milky to chocolate and back again in heartbeats. Sediment lifting and dropping like the creek couldn't decide which color dress it preferred. We idled through in first, walked that last bit to read the current, crossed at the V of the braided flow. Jack chattered like it always does, fast and shallow. Lost came hard into view. You can smell it before you see it. Cold, rock flour, a little iron like a blood nose. The ford was swollen wider than I like it by the time we pulled up. On our side of the crossing, a silver Tacoma sat nose up on the entry slope with the driver's door open. The hazards were dead. There was a child's booster seat in the back with a pink mitten on it. The passenger side window had words traced into the fog. We waited. I killed our engine so we could hear the situation breathe. Lost Creek spoke over everything else. Mid-channel, a seam that wasn't a seam glittered wrong. Not a sandbar. Something catching light where it had no business. Where's he? Nina said, scanning the far bank. I didn't see boot prints down the lip of our side, but up and to the right, along a gravel bar that paralleled the crossing, there were prints, a single set, heel deep, wide stride, headed toward a stand of alder, and then nothing, just the wet stone shine. Hey! I cupped my hands and shouted over the water. This is Park Service! Call back! For a second the creek seemed to drop its voice, and someone answered, here, in a way that was 10 feet away, and also 50. A man's voice, breathless, trying to sound controlled. I can't find where it's shallow, it keeps moving. Stay put, I yelled. Don't try to cross. Keep talking. Here, he said again, but that time the word bent in the middle, the vowel stretched too long. Nina clocked me with a look that said, you heard that? We waded the entry slope, waist deep and bitter. Glacial melt eats the feeling out of your legs in a minute. Each step we set had to matter. The current tugged confident as a big dog. I kept us on the upstream angle, edging toward the gravel bar where the prints had been. The letters on the Tacoma's fogged glass prickled my neck. We waited. We waited for what? 30 feet out, a log turned under the surface and became a coil of rope. Not one we'd lost. Thinner, nylon, striped with red. One end braided into a loop. I caught it and passed it to Nina. "Human rig," she said, breath steady. "Someone tried to ferry themselves." A shout came again. Closer now. "Here!" I looked left, upstream. A man was on the far bank near a cluster of lichen-balled rocks, waving both arms. Mid-40s, beard, ball cap, soaked to the thighs. "I'm here," he called. "I tried the gravel, but it changes. Can you throw me a line?" He looked like 100 men I've pulled off water. Big jacket, 2 light pants, a kind of stunned politeness. I lifted the throw bag. "I'm going to send this," I yelled. "Tie it around your waist low, not around your hand. Do not wrap it around your hand." He nodded with too much eagerness, as if someone unseen had pinched him. "Hurry," he added, almost under his breath. "It doesn't like waiting." I realized I'd been counting something without deciding to. 1, 2, 3, in time with a pulse that wasn't quite mine. Nina's jaw bunched. She heard it too. I let the throw go. The line paid out clean, yellow rope playing a bright path over gray water. The man on the far bank reached, and at the last instant his elbow kinked in a way human elbows don't, and his wrist rotated as if the bone were a swivel. "Hold," Nina said low. "Morgan." I locked. The current took the line's belly and bowed it. The man's hand hovered and then opened and shut like he was relearning how fingers make a fist. "Did you see the wife?" he called, voice stepping on the end of my words like he'd been waiting behind them. "She had the mittens. Pink. She left a message." We waited. "Morgan," Nina said again, this time with enough steel in it to cut a net. "Your left." A second man on our side had risen from the alders we'd just passed. Or something that had the outline of a man. Stood wrong, too tall in the torso. Arms too long, hands hidden in sleeves that didn't move with water or wind, because the only wind was from the creek. And it didn't reach this thing. It didn't lift its head. It didn't have to. "Drop the line," I said. I said. D to myself and to Nina and to whatever had decided to take my voice from me and use it around my own words. I unclipped the throw from my harness and let the current peel it downstream. The man on the far bank watched it go and didn't turn his head, eyes tracking it from the corner of his face like an owl. His mouth hung open too wide, as if the idea of a smile had been stapled in the wrong place. A shape drifted between us and him. Not wood, not foam. A laminated sign, the kind we stake at early season crossings when runoff makes fools out of good tires. "High water, do not cross." The words were distorted by the flow, flexing, rearranging. For a breath-long second, they read in my head as "do not answer." "Sir," Nina said to the far bank, plain and professional, "we can't cross to you safely. If you can move downstream to the shallows by the Willow Island, we'll meet you there. Do not step toward us." He stayed, waiting with that eager politeness fired back up. "Hurry," he said again. "It's getting louder." "It's always been loud," I said without deciding to say it. My mouth was dry. The cold made my legs ache like they were full of salt. The man on our bank took a step without moving his feet. One of those shifts that made distance do new math. He was closer. Close enough I could see that the wet on his coat didn't drip. It clung. "Back," Nina said. "Now." We retreated together, the way you do with bears, calm, deliberate, not giving anything your back if you can help it. The current argued. The creek liked us staying. The creek had opinions. The Tacoma's windshield still read, "We waited." As we reached the lip and got honest dirt under our boots, a voice came from the cab of the empty truck in a tone that had been through 3 different throats before it made it to mine. "Don't leave yet," it said like a suggestion. "She's almost here." The pink mitten in the booster seat lifted on a thread of wind that didn't exist and fell. We got the Tacoma moved up off the slope with the come-along biting and the Tacoma complaining and our arms shaking with cold. We rolled it back enough to clear a lip that the water had undercut while we were watching the knot man watch us. The whole time the creek's sound kept trying to braid into words. You know how the brain wants to turn white noise into voices? It did that, and it did more than that. The wife came trudging down the road 15 minutes later, hair plastered, wearing someone's borrowed slicker, face a raw decision. "He went across," she said he had to check it. "He hates sitting still. The water was lower." It was. And then it wasn't. "Did he say he'd call out? Did he promise anything?" I asked. She swallowed hard enough I heard it. "He said if we waited, it wouldn't get worse." We didn't sleep. We called it up and down. We set beacons. We flagged the crossing from both ends and wrote "Lost Closed" in big marker letters on a piece of stake board and laid it across the entry. We ran the bank lights and walked as far as we dared. Around midnight, the creek dropped a notch like a breath exhaling. A shape bobbed in an eddy, then slid under a lip. It took until early morning and a pair of troopers and a couple from Slana who know how to throw a rope longer than I can to get him out of where the creek let him go. It wasn't supernatural. It was a drowned man. It was a weight. It was silt in his eyelids and silence in his lungs and a wedding ring that had cut a clean circle into a swollen finger. What I can't file in the same drawer is what the wife showed me after. Her phone, a mess of opened messages. One was the in-reach SOS we'd gotten. Another was a short text from a number labeled, "Only Cal they." T had come in 5 minutes after we'd reached the crossing. "Please wait for me." On the screenshot, the timestamp overlapped our call to dispatch by a hair. There was no service at Lost. The nearest signal is miles back at Slana. We pulled my dash cam. The video is water and our backs and the Tacoma inching up and out with that moan they make like the frame has bad knees. The audio at one point clarifies as the creek locks into an odd harmonic. Under it, my voice says, "Don't answer." I don't remember saying that, and Nina swears I didn't. We write the report, and we write the letters, and we write the names. We add another story to the caution. We speak like a first prayer at the Slana desk when someone asks, "Can my Subaru make it?" And we circle the fords on the map with a pen. We say, "Water changes. The road is not a promise. If you wait at Lost, you wait for the creek, not for help. If it speaks to you, if you think you hear a familiar voice saying hurry or here, don't teach it your own word back. It turns it into a tool." We put a new laminated sign at the entry that year. "High water, do not cross." We zip-tied it to the stake the way we always do. Next morning we found it 50 feet downstream, caught in alder roots where we hadn't set it, and the words scarred where gravel had raked it. The scuff marks looked like letters for a second before the angle changed. They looked like we waited. I still patrol out to the mine. I still love that road, for all the trouble it makes for people who think wilderness is a flavor they can sample and then spit. But when Lost gets loud, I don't shout names across it. If I hear English in the water, I do what the old hands do. Step back and let the creek have its say alone. You don't argue with a thing that doesn't need air to talk. Between Nome and Teller, the road doesn't pretend to be anything but a line scrawled across tundra and rock. No trees to hide behind, nothing but permafrost hummocks and lakes punched into the land like thumbprints. Some people call it the road to nowhere. That means they've never driven it with a van full of mail and groceries and oxygen tanks, the kind of nowhere that throws a town a lifeline twice a week, storm willing. I'm Bo. I've run freight and mail between the hub and the coast for 8 years. My rig is a beat-up box truck with a stubborn heater and a dash full of charms I picked up at the Ace in Nome because even practical men love the idea of luck. September, shoulder season. Ocean still open, ground already deciding how hard it wants to be when winter hits. First real blow of the fall had cleaned the air out a day prior and left everything too clear. You could see the hills wail up 50 miles away. The road had that skiff of ice hiding in the shade that likes to laugh at you. My manifest was fat, potatoes, school supplies, a tote full of salmon for an auntie, a bundle of new phones for the school that had everyone in Teller asking me if I could maybe accidentally leave one extra. You learn to be polite. You learn to say no like you're making tea. I left Nome at noon. The light already had that slant to it that makes you feel late for something. By the Chinook River, the wind shifted to the north and the temperature fell out of the cab like someone had opened a trap door. The tundra looked smooth as felt until you focused and saw the ripples and channels and old ATV scars and every little gleam of water that would become ice by morning. At mile 42 or 43, I don't trust the posts out there any more than I trust my own sense of how long an hour is on that road. I saw lights ahead. 2 taillights, low to the ground, steady, just far enough I couldn't make the vehicle yet. Red on gray, comforting. Delivered the message to my brain that someone else was out here, and I didn't say how much I liked that. I bumped the radio to the working channel. "You got a copy up ahead westbound?" I said. My voice sounded too loud for the size of the world. Static. Then a little fizz, like someone shifting with the mic keyed. "Nome base, Bo," I tried. "All's well, passing mile. Call it 40-something, 2 taillights ahead." "Copy," Nome answered. "Storm's building over the coast again. Teller reports gusts later. Don't linger." "Not my hobby," I said. The lights didn't get closer. They didn't get farther. For 10 miles, and I'm not guessing, I kept them in the same place relative to me. I nudged up a click. The box truck whined and tolerated it. The lights answered by not doing a thing, like a carrot on a stick that knew exactly how fast I could trot. The road to Teller runs past lagoons and along ridgelines and over little causeways where the land lets you cross water because the land feels like being kind that day. On the left, the sea when the weather opens its hand. On the right, interior rolling in forever. The two lights led me toward a dip in the land where the road is crowned a little and you can see the old mine scars if you know what to look for. The sun did that polar thing where it slides sideways and pretends to set just to see how you feel about it. "Hey!" crackled over my radio in a voice that made my stomach do a stupid tighten, my wife's voice. "You gonna be home for dinner or should I feed the dog first?" The dog died in June. I put the mic back in the cradle like it had gotten too hot to hold. "Copy," I said to nobody, just because habit is stronger than fear sometimes. The two lights dipped slightly like they'd hit a pothole I knew didn't exist on that stretch. I kept moving. I should have stopped. I know that now. But stopping on a high, empty piece of road with the wind cracking the world thinner doesn't feel like reason. It feels like giving a stranger a ride. A sign appeared on the right, one of those white-painted metal sheets the DOT uses for temporary warnings. Someone had painted in spray paint across it, "Do not follow the lights." The letters were too neat. The edges weren't wind-torn. Fresh. "Cute," I said to the cab. "The jokers got out." The heater gave a little wheeze, the way it does when the thermostat gets bored. The two lights ahead seemed to brightness shift without actually changing power, like someone had cut and pasted a photo wrong. At the bridge over the Tisuk, a ravine more than a river this time of year, the two lights swerved left where there is no left. They took a line that only exists in winter when the snow bridges the void, and the tundra lets you pretend spaces are smaller than they are. I braked. The box went light. The wind got its hands on me and tried to rotate the truck like a toy on a map. I corrected because everything in my bones knows what a crosswind does to an empty rig. The lights hung over the drop for a second longer than gravity should allow, then descended out of sight in a way that wasn't quite down and wasn't quite away. My mouth tasted like pennies, the way it does when you bite your cheek without meaning to. I put the truck in park with exaggerated care, rolled the window, listened. The tundra doesn't have a forest's library of noises. It has the wind prepared in 100 different glass sizes and water making vowels somewhere you can't see, and the occasional ravens saying what the ravens say. The sound that came from where the lights had gone was none of that. It was the high little noise of someone exhaling through their teeth so you'll come closer to hear. "Don't," I said to the dash because the charms were little and I needed a bigger thing to talk to. Headlights came up in my rear view, bright, sudden, closer than anything should have gotten to me on that road without me knowing. A small SUV, white, nose chrome gleaming. It tucked in behind me and flashed its brights 3 times, the older code for move or talk. I grabbed the mic. "Vehicle behind westbound on Teller. You got a copy?" "Got you," a man said with that friendly tone you save for strangers in the grocery line. "You going to sit or you going to drive?" "Road's iffy," I said. Lights went off the causeway. "Looks fine to me," he said, and his brights flashed again, even though the switch on my dash showed no change in the rear view's color when he did. The flash had no source. The light was its own animal. He pulled out to pass. He took the left line, the wrong line, the line toward where the earth had put its foot down long before there were trucks to cross it. As his bumper drew even with my door, I saw his face reflected in my glass like he was already in my cab with me, and there was nothing there, not gray plastic, not his own worry looking back. Just the suggestion of a face like I'd already drawn it earlier and forgotten. "Don't," I said again, more to myself than to him. I put the box into gear and rolled forward just enough to force him to adjust. He did. He tucked back in behind me like it had always been his plan. No sputter of brake, no irritation. The lights didn't move. They were a red certainty in my mirror. Ahead, a new sign. Same white sheet metal, same spray paint. This time the letter edges looked torn where the brush had caught the stubble of the metal. "This road takes you if you let it," it said. It would have been corny if the letters hadn't looked like someone had written them with numb hands. I kept going. Over the bridge, up the next rise. The sea flashed on my left, a piece of tin. The wind had a low growl in it now that meant the fronts were sorting their difference of opinion over the bearing. The two lights ahead appeared again, as if cresting the far hill from a place that had never been, right where the road wanted to lead me. I watched for a third sign because humans are pattern machines, and I will always be one no matter how many times the land tells me not to be. There wasn't a third sign. There was a person, down in a shallow ditch on the right, waving both arms as if to flag me down. I saw a parka. I saw fur. I saw the color you get when frost takes a face by the chin. I braked hard enough to make the cargo twitch. He leaned toward my window. Young, maybe 20, eyelashes beaded with ice. His voice when he spoke was so small and so normal that all the strangeness slid for a second and almost went over the edge. "Don't chase them," he said. "They took my cousin last winter, same lights. We followed till we were on the sea. We didn't know it was sea. He kept saying he saw brake lights. He walked off into a place that wasn't frozen yet. Road noises spin out there. Sound comes back wrong. Where? I asked. He pointed ahead. Onward runs are tricky. The road tells you what you want to hear. The SUV behind me pulled into the left again to pass. The driver leaned forward like a man late to a family thing. As his front tire rolled even with my bumper, it dipped an inch, a tell so small you could spend a life not seeing it. The gravel's tone under his tread changed. My body knew that sound the way a hand knows the difference between skin and bark. It was the sound of structure giving way, of soil that had looked dry deciding not to hold on. I didn't think. I drop-shifted hard, gunned the engine, and edged him back like a sheepdog bullying a ewe, not gentle. He should have been angry. He should have braked, flashed, swore. He stayed on me like heat on a man in a tent. We crested the hill. The two lights ahead fell away again, and this time, in that sick little drop of a second, I saw where they fell. Not forward, not sideways, down into the dim gleam of a black ribbon of open water slicing the tundra like something had taken a knife to the world and forgotten to glue it back. I stopped. Sometimes you make the right call, and you still get punished. The wind hit us full, hard enough to rock the box. I put the flashers on. The SUV behind me turned its wheels left and right in tiny pulses like it was getting calibrated. I watched those taillights in my mirror until they didn't look like taillights anymore, just 2 points of red stuck to my retina in a way that made the darkness itch. The young man from the ditch climbed into my cab and tucked his hands into his armpits without asking. He smelled like diesel and ice and the salt of someone who'd been crying recently and didn't want anyone to know. He said he'd been walking back to tell her because the four-wheeler he'd borrowed died when the wind got in the plug wires. Said he saw my box and the two lights that live between here and there and decided to see if I was the kind to chase. We drove the rest of the way in a convoy of two, me and the red certainty behind me, at 30 miles an hour while the storm rearranged the coastline. The signs were gone by the next day when I came back out. The spray paint hadn't faded. The signposts had never been, according to Dot. The young man's cousin's mother didn't need my story. She had hers. Every community on the coast keeps a list they don't show on paper. On it are the names of boys and girls and men who went where the road pretends to go in winter and didn't get to come back when the calendar flipped. You don't really drive Eagle Summit in a blow. You negotiate terms with it. I've been a DOT operator out of Central for 19 winters. Graders, blowers, sand trucks, and I've watched the Steese bury pickups to their mirrors in 10 minutes and swallow a Freightliner clean. I answered a call sign Plow 12, though most folks just know me as Hank at the coffee counter in Central Corner. Eagle Summit and 12 Mile Summit are my home court. They'll kill you if you forget to be humble, and I've had too many reminders to get cocky. It was one of those January nights where the temperature stops being a number and becomes a taste, metallic and mean. The wind wrote white snakes across the pavement. Aurora smudged low and hardly moved. Around 9 p.m., dispatch pinged our shed. Trooper request to break a path to a stranded sedan somewhere between the summits. Woman inside, running low on gas. Phone battery worse. Report said she was a teacher headed back to Circle after in-service in Fairbanks and tried to beat the blow. She made it as far as the milepost pullout below Eagle before the world went sideways. I spun up Plow 12, a big orange with a wing and front blade, and my partner Lacey took the rotary blower because you never know when you'll need to make a tunnel. The shed doors boomed open like coffin lids and the night hit us in the throat. You learn to read a blow by the shape of the drifts. Pencil drifts mean the summit is only talking. The blue drifts mean it's singing. Blue isn't a color so much as an absence. It shows up under halogens like old ice and hangs in the air where a drift has cut itself off from the ground and become something else. We saw blue by the time we crested 12 Mile. I radioed Lacey. Plow 12 to blower 8, we're in it. I can't see my hood, she said, calm as always. I'll bury you if I'm not careful. Stay 10 car lengths. The mileposts out there do. Won't do you many favors at night. You catch a rectangle and then it's gone, like someone lifted a painting to show you the wall behind. Snow fence rattled like bones. I kept a slow crawl. The wind made a blade-length shift left and the truck tugged that way too, like something had me by the belt. At mile 107, Eagle Summit proper, an eddy of snow cleared under the fence and I saw a sedan down in the pullout, hood into the drift. Dome light burned weak yellow. The wind sculpted streamers off the antenna like party ribbons in a meat locker. Got her, I keyed. Pullout, east side. I'm going in first. Cut a lead. When you step out in that kind of blow, you move like a diver. 3 points of contact on every breath. The cold is a physical object. It pushes back. I wrestled the door open and rode it shut. Snow hit my face hard enough to sting. The drift had grown up the sedan's doors to mid-hip. The driver's window wore a glaze where her breath had frozen and built itself into a frost cathedral. I put my face to the gap and yelled, "Ma'am, Diot, you okay?" Her face swam up out of the gloom and landed inches from mine, eyes wide, cheeks raw. "You took so long," she said, but the sentence had the slack timing of someone who'd been repeating it to herself. Behind her, the dome light pulsed like a tired heart. The smell of exhaust, sweet and wrong, leaked when she cracked the door latch. I put my shoulder to it to hold it shut. "Keep it closed," I shouted. "You run in heat?" "Off and on," she said. "The wind..." She stopped and smiled a small, apologetic smile, like she'd told a joke, and remembered at the last second it wasn't funny. "It knocked just now, on the glass. Little knocks." The hair on my scalp tightened. "You see anyone?" She shook her head and winced. "Headache. That exhaust smell again." I glanced at the tailpipe. Not visible. The drift had taken it. "Lacey," I radioed, "I need you to punch the berm behind this sedan so I can get the pipe clear. She's got CO. "Working," Lacey said. The rotary spun up and screamed its snow-eating scream. The wind changed pitch around us. It does that. The pass has chords you only hear when you stop breathing your own fear into your ears. Under the roar, 3 faint taps came from the far rear window. Delicate. Fingers on glass. I turned my head, expecting to see a mitten. The window was whited out. The taps came again, and for a second the frost thinned, where something warmer than the air touched it. 3 circles formed, as if something pressed a fingertip, lifted, pressed, child height. "Hey!" I yelled over my shoulder at a world that had nothing in it but weather. "Get back in your vehicle." The teacher flinched like I'd shouted at her. I tasted metal and stupidity. I'd put my mouth where the pass could hear me. "We carry CO alarms clipped to our vests for exactly this." Mine started to chirp. Not the big alarm, that little pre-cry that says, "You're making bad choices." I dropped to my knees, dug gloved fingers into the drift at the tail. Snow in that temperature feels like hard sugar. It squeaks. The blower's throw roared behind me as Lacey chewed the berm back. The blue crosslight off the halogens made my hands look dead. The teacher's door latch clicked again. I slammed the edge of my palm against the seam without lifting my eyes. "Don't open it," I said. "You'll lose your heat. I'm getting your pipe clear." "It's knocking," she whispered, voice ghosted by the glass. "It's cold. It wants in." I made a vent the size of a softball at the tailpipe. Exhaust fogged, then cleared. The CO alarm sat down and shut up. I forced the tone friendly. "Okay, you're gonna turn your engine on for 10 minutes, then off for 10. Crack a front window a finger's width, not more. Keep a blanket over your lap. We're going to hook a tow and pull you forward into clean air. Will you..." She bit the sentence. "Do you know the way? It keeps turning around," she said, and that last came out not like a question but like a confession. "My phone map. The arrow spins. I thought I was at the top and then I wasn't." "Stay put," I said. We'll lead you down." Behind me the taps came again, but to my right this time, at my hip level on the plow's lower door panel. 3 quick, light knocks, as if a small hand wanted to know if the metal was thin enough to open. Lacey cut the drift back to bare ice behind the sedan. Whiteout argued with our lights, throwing shadow where there shouldn't be any. She idled in, blower still belching, and yelled over the din, "Hook her now!" I clipped a short strap to the sedan's front tow hook and waved for Lacey to back gently. The sedan shifted, tires squeaking, wheels turned the wrong way from some earlier panic. It moved 2 feet, 3, the strap went slack. A child giggled just behind my left ear. I turned fast enough I saw stars, nothing but a wall of blown sugar, then a shape in the blue swale beyond Lacey's blower, small, hood up, red. It bent at the waist and pressed its forearms flat on the drift like it was leaning on a windowsill. No adult with it, no tracks around and away. The wind ate everything. The hooded head turned in a motion too slow for the cold, like syrup poured in February. I didn't see a face. I saw an idea of one. "What?" Lacey barked. Her eyes followed mine. "You got a visual?" "Negative," I said, and I heard my voice fall in the snow and not come back the same. "Hook's set. Let's move." We put the teacher in my cab. She moved like a much older woman. The last thing she did before shutting her sedan's door was reach for the rear handle like habit, check on a kid who wasn't there, then catch herself, with a sharp intake of breath that told me this wasn't the first time she'd nearly done it tonight. In my cab, I tossed her a wool blanket and shoved the seat heater to high. "You alone?" I asked one more time, not letting implication into my tone. "Yeah," she said, too fast, then slower. "Yes, I keep hearing... Sid..." She stopped like she'd bitten into a stone, changed it. I keep hearing my student, the one who makes up knocking games. He wasn't here, obviously. She laughed once, the kind of laugh you can break in your hand like ice. Keep your mouth shut, I said almost kindly. No names out loud. Once you hear your own father's voice in the wind telling you to climb down and clean a tailpipe, you know you shouldn't say names where the past can learn them. We moved as a 3-vehicle train, Lacey breaking a slot with the blower, me inching behind with the teacher in the cab and her sedan hooked by a short tether to my rear, the pass around us arranging white into decision. Twice the world righted itself and we could see 10 truck lengths. Twice it collapsed to a cube of angry sugar where my headlamp halos were the only proof of physics. Halfway between the summits, the CO alarm chirped again. I glanced at the teacher, gray at the lips. Her eyes had that slip that says a person is thinking about sleep. Sit up, I said. Name 5 red things from the classroom. She looked at me as if I'd asked her to explain snow to me in German. 5 red things? Yeah, say them. Crayon, she said. Stapler. A tiny pause. Her eyes drifted to the side window. The sound came then, right on the other side of the glass. 3 fast taps at the bottom corner by her knee, and a 4th, out of tempo, a child ruining a game because they're bored. Sid, she said, and clapped a hand over her own mouth like she'd just cussed in church. Don't, I said, more force than I intended. Blanket, head up, stapler, what else? Ball, she whispered. My mug, the good scissors. My wife painted our shed door red, I said, because sometimes your voice is a rop. Someone can hold even if you don't have anything worth tying them to. Hates it, says it makes the snow look dirty. I like it. Another knock, far side this time, 3 light ones, then the blue in the periphery pressed in like a hand. The pass shifted. You can feel it if you've done this long enough. The wind decides to try a new angle on you and see how you do. Lacey's blower's pitch changed. The drift in front of her lifted and settled like it had lungs. She keyed the radio. Plow 12, the fence line just ate itself. I'm losing definition. And then my world tilted as the front of the plow slid toward the ditch at slow motion while appearing to move very fast. The strap to the sedan went tight as a violin string. Lacey's blower screamed. Snow came over my hood like milk boiling out of a pan. Stay with me, I growled to the truck, to the woman, to myself. I feathered out of throttle and let weight be weight. If you fight in a blow, you lose your own argument. If you try to be a hero, the hill eats your bones and the coyotes lick your name. The front tire found a bite. The drift recoiled. Then, no lie, the wind shut off for one breath, like a big thing had inhaled. In that breath, clear as if it had leaned in the window, a voice said in a little boy's stage whisper, "Open." We got down, 1 mile at a time, 1 gate, 1 prayer turned into a list of bolts I'd replaced on this truck and the sound of my father cussing when he broke his thumb on a chain binder back in '94. At Central, the lights were butter warm, and the deep cold had to stay out because the door said so. The teacher shook like people do when the danger's done, and their body finally has a say. The trooper took her statement. She wrote careful, like a student, pressing the letters too hard. She admitted the part where she'd thought she'd heard a knock, and once she thought she saw a child in a red parka outside and wanted to open the door to see if he was okay. He couldn't be out in that alone, she told me later, smaller. But what if, she added, and I knew her life, the kind that made a woman keep a bag of granola bars in her car to hand to kids who forgot lunch. We pulled my cab camera because I like my nightmares concrete. The video is snow and my hands and the blue that isn't a color. The audio, at the moment the plow slid, recorded nothing but blower and engine, and then a hole where sound should be. A vacuum. In that hole, a whisper that might be air moving in a crack and might be nothing at all. If you boost it and play it too many times, like I did at 2 in the morning, it resolves into a sound children make when they knock on a door and then run. Lacey keeps a string of red plastic pennants hanging on her blower's dash now. Not for luck, for color. Something to name that isn't a person if the past demands to hear your mouth. I keep a strip of duct tape on my window with a note in Sharpie. Don't open, keep exhaust clear, count red things. When the blue shows up in my lights, I don't call names. I don't answer a knock I didn't ask for. And if I have to speak, I say useful words, numbers, the names of tools, the names of men who taught me different kinds of caution. If you run the stees when the drifts turn blue, remember this. The pass listens, it borrows, it repeats. Don't teach it anything you want to keep. Don't open what you didn't close. And if you hear 3 little knocks in a storm with no hands in it, bring your breath back inside and keep going. The summit counts the ones who stop. I wasn't born on Prince of Wales, but the island has a way of adopting people who learn to be quiet in the rain. I hauled fuel and parts for a logging outfit out of Clawuk for 6 seasons. Midnights more than days because machines don't care what the clock says when they break. If you don't know POW, imagine a knot of mountains with 100 fingers of water poking at it from every side and a spiderweb of logging roads crisscrossing the hills. Forest Service Road 20 runs from Thorn Bay toward the Big Middle and counts a dozen spurs for every mile you'd think it should. The map lies. The alder decides. You drive rain, you sleep rain, you age rain. Old guys at the bar in Craig gave me the same advice everyone gets. Don't whistle in the timber. Don't say your name in the dark. And if something asks for a ride when the road is empty, ask it where it's going without opening your door. People make jokes about superstition until the forest decides to love them a little too hard. Early November, wind from the south chewing the ocean into rope. I had a pallet of parts and a drum of hydraulic oil to get out to a loader that had decided to snap its own guts on a spur above Heidelberg. The crew had a time window around the tide and they'd pushed it. Now it was my turn. I rolled the flatbed out of Thorn Bay, windshield thudding with alder catkins and the kind of rain that looks like static. POW roads make their own weather. They hold fog like a cupped hand and let it go in strips across your headlights. Reflectors live here the way lichens do. Sometimes they shine, sometimes the forest eats them. I'd been on 20 for an hour when the GPS decided to drop its crumbs like a kid bored with his snack. The road sign for the spur I wanted, 20 to 700, was half gone. The numbers faded, the arrow knocked sideways. I took it anyway because my body knows where the truck leans on that grade. I kill. Ed speed where the road narrows to one lane and the alder arches like a cathedral for wet things. Headlights made knives out of the drops. The ditch on my right found a voice and began speaking in that particular language of water over rock POW specializes in. Old, steady, like it's telling you its own biography. The road bucked under me where someone had carved a trench for a culvert and never returned to fill the scar. Then I heard a whistle. Just 2 notes, quick, bird bright, close to my passenger window. I looked over expecting a wren being arrogant under the eave. Nothing but alder and rain and spray off my tire. I don't whistle back, not because of stories, but because of common sense. You blow air out your mouth at night on this island, the island blows back sooner or later. I kept driving. The radio on the dash licked at static and settled. Half a mile up, one headlight flicked on in the trees to my right. Not a car headlight, one of those Harbor Freight work lights wired to a shop's ceiling, the beam too white, too fixed. It shone through the alder at waist height into the road, steady as you please. I braked out of reflex and swore. Don't stop, I told the truck and myself both. The light blinked out. The whistle came again. 3 notes this time, uphill, matching a tune I couldn't quite remember. It tugged at me the way the smell of somebody's laundry can send you home hard. I put the window down a crack. The rain beaded the door card and began its quiet drip onto the rubber mat. The forest huffed the clean, wet sour of cedar and leaf rot. The ditch on the left had found a stronger voice. Water there worked itself up into a frenzy over a slot too tight for the volume. Heidelberg crew, I said into the handheld. You guys pulling power off a Jenny up here? Seeing a work light? Negative, came back a man's voice I recognized from a dozen fuel stops. Haas, the loader boss. We're still at the bottom, waiting on tide. You shouldn't be seeing anything. As if a radio had rules, the whistle layered over his last word and made the syllables wobble. I turned my head and looked uphill into the black and saw a reflector blink. White, 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 and then not again. There's this thing your brain does when you see a person-sized shape where there shouldn't be one. It makes a quick child of you, then gives you your adult back all in a flash. Up ahead, in my low beams, a figure stepped out of the alder and stood in the road, turned sideways like a man looking both ways. Rain ran off the hood of his parka in sheets. He held one hand up with his fingers pinched together the way guys do when they're about to show you a small bolt you can't see from the cab. I stopped because people trump stories in my head, even when stories gnaw the back of my neck. He came around to my side window and the glass drew his face clean as a story you tell yourself. Young, early 20s maybe, faint mustache, skin sallow the way night makes everyone sick. He had a lazy left eye, just a touch, the kind that makes a face look sweet. He leaned down and the rain spilled off his hood like a curtain. Hey, he said, and his voice went under my ribs. You headed to 700? Yeah, I said, not opening the door. You stuck? He smiled, or almost smiled. The corners crawled. Yeah, we are. We need a pull, just up there. He pointed with his chin, the island way. "Can you—" He made a little circle with his index finger like he wanted me to roll the window down more. I didn't. "How far?" "Just up there," he said again, and now the lazy eye didn't drift anymore. It held me dead. The whistle came from behind my seat, clear as glass. 2 notes, same as the first ones, as if someone had opened my cab door without opening my cab door and leaned in from the back. I hit the locks on muscle memory. The sound of the pins falling into place was indecently loud. The guy at the window didn't flinch. His hood didn't drip right. Not enough rain left his edges. He brought his fingertips up to the glass. 1, 2, 3. Gentle taps like he didn't want to wake someone. "Please," he said, and the word stretched into 3 syllables without moving his lips enough to make it. "We need." You get used to making little rules for yourself after hours on these roads. One I learned from an elder in Heidelberg after a maintenance day that went sideways. Never back up to a stranger's gesture at night. Turn your face toward the water when you talk to it. Don't show it your back. And the one I was thinking hard about now. If a request doesn't come with a name, it's not for you. "What's your name?" I asked, like I would have asked a kid checking out a jerry can from the shed. He blinked. Rain ran. He made a sound that started with an M and became a sigh. "We," he said brightly, like he'd found the right answer. "We need." "Who's we?" He lifted his hand again and did that rolling motion near the window, as if my inside air belonged to him. "You know," he said, and the lazy eye drifted and then snapped back hard enough I could almost hear it. "You know." "Slide," Haas said over the handheld, sudden and too loud. "You hearing that? We got a slide up here at the spur. Stay put a minute. We're clearing it with the excavator. Don't come up into that. There's water undercutting the fill." "Copy," I said, eyes on the knot man. The word undercutting has a way of ruining your appetite. The figure's mouth thinned, like a kid told he couldn't have a second cookie right now. He pursed his lips. 2 notes of a whistle, precise and cheery, rose from between them, but his cheeks didn't puff the way human cheeks have to if you blow. The sound came from the ditch. The light from the knotwork light flared again to my right where my truck's rear wheels would pivot if I came around the bend to back up for him. It cast a weak oval on the road and then leaked away into alder like it had come out of the wood. My ears went full of my own heartbeat and the deeper ocean hum the forest makes when it's about to show you something you didn't ask to see. "Tell me something only a stuck man would know," I said to the face at the glass, surprising myself as much as him. His eyebrows lifted a millimeter, not in question, more like amusement. "Like what's busted," I said. "Like what size bolt you dropped when you laughed the first time it fell because you thought it was funny." He made a sound with his tongue, a click that echoed more than it should in a cab with a closed window. "We need," he said again, pleasant as a radio host. "Yeah," I said, "but I don't." I put the truck in first and let my foot off the clutch. The figure stepped aside with that weird, backwards drift some people do when they misjudge your basis. Umper. For a second, the face flattened on the glass, deer in the headlights angle, the features trying to stay arranged while the head and body forgot to collaborate. The lazy eye rolled off and came back. I drove forward and around the bend. The road there collapsed to a ribbon with alder fingertips combing the roof. The ditch gushed. I stopped in a spot that had enough straight to let me breathe and got out to cut a hanging branch with the saw. The whistle came again, from down the spur where I was heading, from the black behind me, from the water itself. "Don't," a woman's voice said flat to my left. I didn't look. Good advice comes from all sorts of directions on this island. Don't whistle back. Don't say your name. I cleared the bend. The road opened into a switchback cut backed by a plug of dark rock. In my headlights, the undermined section gleamed with the slick sheen of a road trying to pretend it was still a road. Where the knot man had wanted me to back was a pocket in the outside edge big enough to swallow my rear axle. In it, the water had eaten the fill into a throat. The harbor freight light I'd seen maybe is just a pale fungus on a stub snapped off by earlier blowdown. Or it's exactly what it looked like, but it lives there and not in the confirmation of any photograph I could take. The handheld hissed. "All right," Haas said. "We got the muck peeled off. Come on up, but give us 5. Excavate's parked on the inside." I pulled into the landing and shut down. The rain increased like a tap opened a quarter turn somewhere above my head. I sat in the quiet with my hands on my thighs and counted my breaths down from 10 like an idiot who wanted to do math in a storm. The whistle came one more time, almost sheepish. 2 notes. Then the forest took a breath and folded itself back into the rain. We got the parts to the loader. The crew worked under tarps while I watched the rain make its own stories in the puddles. One of the younger guys, a cousin of someone, dropped a socket in the duff and swore like he meant it. He laughed when he found it and held it up between finger and thumb like a small treasure. The motion stung me with deja vu. I told Haas the whistle bit while we drank coffee under his tailgate. He pursed his lips like a man holding back 5 things and said only, "You didn't whistle back. Good. Don't." Back in Thorn Bay, I pulled my dash camera because I always pull my dash camera. The footage shows rain and alder, shows a figure in the beam for 1.5 beats, too fast for a still. Freeze-framed and enhanced, it's a man in a hood, nothing you could count a name by. The audio caught the whistle clear enough to learn the notes. 2 notes, same interval each time. If you run a tuner on it, it's a major second. Happy, harmless, designed to feel like a children's song. On the tape, when the whistle plays the 3rd time, you can hear me say my name in the mouth of a sentence I don't remember starting, and then hear me stop, like someone took my jaw in their hand and pinched my lips shut before I finished. The guys in Craig will tell me I'm making a ghost story out of rain. The auntie who sells smoked coho out of a cooler will pat my arm and tell me to keep cotton in my pocket to stuff in my ears if I get too friendly in the timber next time. My friend from Heidelberg will shake his head and tell me I should have never rolled down the window even a crack because this island likes to learn your inside air and the sound of you breathing. I still drive Road 20. You have to work, you have to be a person, which is just another way of saying you keep showing up. But I don't whistle, and I don't answer whistles that don't belong to humans I can count. If someone knocks on my glass without dripping on it first, I nod, keep my hand on the wheel, and ask the road out loud what it wants. Sometimes it tells you with water. Sometimes it tells you by letting you go. If you wind into the heart of POW at night, remember, the forest is patient and the roads are not a promise. Names stick to wet leaves. Whistles follow your air. Don't teach the dark who you are. Don't follow a light that wants you to back toward it. And if a sweet-faced thing asks for a ride without a name, give it the weather report and keep going. Welcome back to Sleep Maw. Tonight we braved Alaska's loneliest bush roads. Dalton Ice Fog, the Taylor's Cairns, Denali's Looping Miles, McCarthy's Iron Spine, Nebesna's Roaring Fords, the Road to Teller, Stee Summit's Blue Drifts, and the soaked logging spurs of POW. If these true encounters sent a chill through your heater vents, make sure you're subscribed and tap the bell so you don't miss our next descent into the dark. Drop a comment with your own road stories, or the one that got under your skin tonight, and hit like to help other night drivers find us. Keep your doors locked, don't follow the lights, and whatever you do, don't answer when the road knocks back.